Hi there, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another virtual Pages of History Storytime program. My name's Pam and I'm the Education Coordinator at the Westmoreland Historical Society in historic Hannastown. And the book we're going to read this week is Counting Birds, The Idea That Helped Save Our Feathered Friends by Heidi E.Y. Stemple and illustrated by Clover Robin. Now we're really lucky in Westmoreland County to have a lot of great parks and nature reserves and environmental organizations that help preserve nature. And this book explores the history of what's called the annual Christmas bird count. While it might not be Christmas time right now, this is a great time of year for us to be looking at birds. A lot of birds are returning from their wintering homes. They're starting to become more active. You'll see them at bird feeders. You'll see them creating nests. And so if you want to start practicing bird watching for the Christmas bird count, this is a great time to do it. It's also a great activity to do while you're at home. You can watch birds from your own backyard. So we're going to learn a little bit more about this history and a man named Frank Chapman. So Frank Chapman loved birds. He worked at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, creating exhibits about birds. He wrote books and magazine articles about birds. He studied birds' habits and habitats. He read the research of John James Audubon, the most famous ornithologist of all time. Frank Chapman loved birds. And I think we can see from his office here that he really loves birds too. There's all kinds of birds here. We see a goldfinch. We see some little sparrows and wrens. I think there's even a flamingo up there, a bluebird, owl, a loon. There's all kinds of birds to explore in all different types of habitats. In 1899, he began his own magazine called Bird Lore. Every 2 months, Bird Lore was published and read by other bird lovers. So there he is designing his book. Around this time, Americans were starting to think about the natural world around them. First scientists and poets, then government leaders, and finally more regular citizens were starting to talk about conservation. And conservation is the word for protecting nature and preserving it. How could they better live in their world? How could they save the wilderness that was disappearing, the forests that were being cut down, the waterways that were being polluted, and the animals and birds that were being overhunted? So here we see that's President Roosevelt. We have a hat down here. If you look really closely at this hat, it actually has feathers in it. So it used to be that in the fashion industry they used a lot of feathers, and that's not allowed anymore. And here we see a little pigeon, and it has a band on its leg, and that's part of a process called bird banding that helps track the movements of birds. And here in Westmoreland County we have an organization called Powdermill Nature Reserve, which is part of the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, and they've been doing bird banding up near Ligonier for about 60 years. But not everyone cared about conservation. On Christmas Day, sports hunters would all gather, choose teams, and hold bird hunting competitions. All day long, the hunters looked for birds. Large birds, small birds, all birds were game. At the end of the day, the birds were counted, and the winning team was the side that had shot and killed the most birds. So here we see all different kinds of bird species. You might recognize some of these birds in your backyard. And we've got some robins, goldfinches, this little bird called a dark-eyed junco, a blue jay, sparrows, a bluebird, a chickadee, a big bright red cardinal. There's even a little woodpecker pecking on the side of this tree. Now Frank Chapman did not love this tradition. In the pages of his magazine, he set out to stop it. Now, Bird Lore proposes a new kind of Christmas side hunt in the form of a Christmas bird census, and we hope that our readers who have the opportunity will aid us in making it a success by spending a portion of Christmas Day with the birds and sending a report of their hunt to Bird Lore before they retire for the night. Count them, he proposed. but don't kill them. So here he is advocating for us to count the birds on Christmas Day. That first year, on Christmas Day, 1900, 27 bird watchers in 25 locations from Connecticut to California counted common loons and killdeer, winter wrens, and red-winged blackbirds. Here's all of the people counting the birds. They've got binoculars. They're looking really closely. That's a great way to see birds up close. They observed hermit thrushes, barred owls, Carolina chickadees, fish crows, turkey vultures, and spotted and canyon towhees. In all, BirdLore proudly reported close to 18,500 birds from 89 different species. Not one bird was killed. Here's all the different bird species. You can see just how different they all are. They've got different colors, different sizes. Some of them have different legs. Some are, like the loon is built more for swimming, whereas the owl is built for hunting, and the little songbirds are built for being real quick and agile. That first count was not the last. Every year in December, more people joined the count. Every year, more areas were added, and every year, more and more birds were counted in every corner of the United States, as well as Canada, Mexico, and Colombia. Other counts happened all over the world. So we can see even more bird species, including some we might not see in our backyards, like we've got some flamingos and toucans. We even have a penguin here. The birds are different all over the world, depending on the climate that they live in, the temperature. The owlers are the first ones onto the field. They climb out of their warm beds at midnight and call down owls in the dark. By the light of the moon, they raise their hands to their mouths and whistle. They use recordings of real owls to hoot. They wait and listen. When an owl calls back, the owlers mark their maps and move on to the next spot. So when it's dark, you might not be able to see the owls, but you can hear them and identify them by their calls. When the sun starts to rise, so do fresh birders who arrive and take over. Some owlers say goodnight, and some keep counting. All day long, groups observe and take notes in their count circles. Sandwich terns and song sparrows, creepers, thrashers, and buffleheads, brants and bobwhites. All birds are welcome. And not all bird watchers are in the field. Some count the birds that visit their backyards. All birders are welcome. So you can do this kind of scientific research no matter where you are. At the end of the day, the birders collect their notes and add their numbers. Later, the National Audubon Society will compile all the data and learn many things: how climate change affects bird populations, which species are in trouble, what areas need conservation help. The birders know this is important for science, but that night, what is really important are their stories. Who found the most owls? Which rare birds were spotted? What records were broken? The Audubon Christmas Bird Count has become the longest-running citizen science project and wildlife census in the world. Everyone wins: the birds, the birders, and science. And all of this is because Frank Chapman loved birds. There we see him with all different kinds of species. There's a bald eagle, and that's the national bird of the United States. You have some birds in the water, like pelicans and ducks, a turkey vulture, and some more songbirds flying around. And that's the story of Frank Chapman. And that's what he really looked like, the picture there, and a copy of his bird lore magazine. And the Christmas bird count still happens today. So you can go out and you can count the birds on Christmas Day. Or, like right now, you can start practicing. You can go out and see how many birds you can find, what kind of species they are. Maybe they're different at different times of day. There's some more birds there. You can keep track of things on paper, or you can even use apps like iNaturalist, which is a great app for keeping track of the things you find in nature. So that's the story of Frank Chapman and how he started with counting birds. I hope you enjoyed the story. Thanks again for joining us for another virtual Pages of History Storytime. Look for more videos to come. Again, if you have the chance, take a look at some of the birds you might be able to see in your backyard. If you're able to make it out to a local park or nature center, that would be great too. And I hope you can come visit us later this year at Historic Hannastown, where we have a lot of different birds you can see, as well as a lot of history to discover. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.